What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Ancient Wisdom, your weekly Pokemon TCG podcast. My name is Corey Roush. With me, as always, is DJ Keener. DJ, how are you?
I'm pretty good, Corey. How are you, man?
I'm okay, doing good. Uh, it's weird because now we've recorded back to back Monday, so it doesn't feel like it's that long in apart from like when we actually are talking about this. But it's still weird to be doing it on a day like today. So, kind of getting used to a change in how things are going. But other than that, everything is good on my end.
Yeah. Hopefully, don't have to do too many Mondays, or at least certainly not too many Mondays directly after events from now on, because definitely didn't really get a chance to even get all of the information, let alone digest it.
Yeah,
But
I didn't get to watch. I was busy this weekend, so I didn't get to watch literally any of the stream. And I'll watch it at work over the course of the week, but that has not happened yet.
yeah, well,
So
selfishly, I've been watching Battle Spirits coverage instead. So
that's sick, actually. I'm glad that I'm happy to hear that they actually have coverage like right out the gate, which is pretty cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty impressive. And I don't know what he's doing anymore, but one of the guys who is did the casting for the event used to be a League of Legends caster, so it's not like it's a nobody who just kind of popped in. It's somebody who's been in the scene for a long time, and that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I know that One Piece had something similar, whereas it's not like as big necessarily as League, but the people that are doing a lot of the One Piece events also did like Digimon and Dragon
Hmm.
Ball and all that stuff. So there's a similar amount of coverage that is allowing these games to kind of take off right from the jump. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think
Um,
Bandai's done a really good job with that, so shout out to them, obviously. But that's obviously not what we're here for. This is a Pokemon podcast, so before we lose our minds.
yeah. So what have you been playing over the last week, or have you been playing much over the last week? I know
Yeah,
you were really
so
deep in Battle Spirits, but
yeah, for sure. I messed with Mew a little bit more just to kind of get my list where I wanted it to be before the regional, and then ended up not realizing that I didn't. I was wondering why I couldn't figure out what my 60th card was supposed to be. It was because I didn't have an Echoing Horn with me when I put my deck together and took a picture, so that's awkward. Um, but that's okay. So messed with that a little bit more, and then immediately after the podcast, played a couple games of Arctina, um, which ended up being maybe even better than we thought it was
yeah.
last week. And the real lesson that I came away from that is the truth that, man, is it hard for us to highly rate decks that are just no fun to play.
Yeah, and it's not even just based on the results. And obviously, we're going to get into Portland and Sao Paulo and stuff like that over the course of the pod. But it's not even just based on the results. It was more of a I just have to finally do it because we have testing coming up for NAIC. I just have to commit. So like today, I ordered my RCS and my Giratinas because like even if I don't ever want to play the decks, like you can't just ignore them. And that's kind of like we said that the deck was good last week. We told one of our friends to buy the deck because as we told him it was idiot proof, but also it's a really good deck. And then it goes and wins, Portland Regionals.
Yeah, wins Portland and to a lesser extent the Singapore regional to just shout that one out too. So I mean, definitely a good weekend for the deck. I think if we had recorded a couple of days later, it would have definitely been like we kind of had it as the maybe top three deck, maybe fourth deck. It definitely would have been like if it wasn't the top three, it would have been like these are the four decks we like, not
Hmm.
the three plus maybe this one or however you wanted to phrase it. Deck's good and definitely impressive results for it, but. The thing that will always keep me from rating it as high as it probably deserves to, and this would not stop me from playing a deck in an event, so I don't want to say that, but the deck would have to perform so well for me to be bought into a deck like that because it's just not fun to play.
Hmm.
Like, there's small decisions, it's all very linear at the end of the day. And I mean, obviously, you get your edges and playing well matters, it does with every deck, but like, it's just like not enjoyable gameplay to the point where I would be like, oh yeah, I'm definitely playing this. I would never tie break into that deck if that makes sense.
No, and like that's been my feeling. Like, I mean, this goes back to whenever I first started playing Pokemon, and like back at the beginning of the XY era
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. Because the big harbinger of that time was like the Evital EX deck, and its thing was it had 50/50s across the board. It wasn't necessarily all that exciting to play. There were like again, there were decisions that mattered throughout, but it was not exactly the most exciting deck in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I was actually not traveling like a ton, but more than I am now, I'm a little bit more of an adult now, so I can't go like multiple
Unfortunate.
weekends in a month. I know, right? But I never convinced myself to really play it at many events or even like try to test it because it's like I'd rather just play stuff I enjoy. And oddly enough, that just punched championship points away for no reason when you could actually just
Mm-hmm.
play better things rather than trying to, have fun. And if you want to have fun, that's fine. But if you want to sit there and say that you're competitive, sometimes you have to play decks that aren't the most exciting too.
Yeah, I mean, I think something you said there was really important though, because I think that is what changed when we were kind of talking about Arctina last week too, and the Evil to deck at certain points as well, where it's like you don't a deck being close to 50-50 in every matchup doesn't necessarily make it a good deck or a good call.
Hmm.
And it's funny because we do the backwards almost, where like it's really easy to convince yourself those decks are good because like you have game against everything, like your games are close, but uh, when you're, let's call it, between 45 and 55 in every matchup, like, yeah, your matchup spread is decent, but like your overall win rate's not very good either. And there's
No,
like
yeah,
the only real upside to those decks as far as like matchups goes is like in a totally undefined field, I guess. If you can play a bunch of 50-50s when you have no idea what you're playing against, that is better than playing polarized matchups totally in the dark sometimes.
yeah,
But
yeah. That makes
like
sense.
for us, that's like it's also hard. I've explained this before for Yu-Gi-Oh. For the same reason that you just said, like we don't get to travel that much. It's really hard for me to justify playing like a quote unquote fair deck that takes a bunch of close to 50-50s because like I gotta spike the events that I play in, my man. I don't go to enough of them
Yeah,
to play Arctina, take all 50-50s, go 9-6 at a regional or whatever. It's like it's not bad. A lot of people would be happy with that result, but like when you don't get to go to a ton of them, that's not the result I'm looking for, right?
yeah. It's all about what your goals are, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things go into that calculus. And
And that being said,
to,
like this weekend it was a good call. So
oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So for me, like I said, I go after last week. I ended up playing a decent bit of Arctina online, and while it's, like I said, it's not the most exciting deck, I obviously came away really liking its position. I played a bunch of Mew because I was pretty high on it after we talked last week, and like I stood by it. Like I thought that deck was insane.
mhm.
And then just working things out across the course of the week because I'm always, like I think it's been pretty clear at this point that I always default back to some version of Lost Box. I did try a lot with the Moltres. I ended up like I wasn't really playing the Kyogre. I was kind of playing without it and seeing if I liked it without it because I'd seen a couple people post lists without the Kyogre in it, and I just think the Kyogre is better. It obviously opens up some polarization, and it seems like, I mean, obviously the list that topped did not play Battle VIP Pass, but I've seen that a lot whenever they are playing both Kyogre and Moltres, and I kind of hate that, but I also kind of get it because there's only so much room there. But well, I mean, we'll get into it as we get into the list, but that was kind of what I was messing around with it by the end of last week, and I feel like going into this week and going forward, it's going to be a little bit more of the same, right?
Yeah, for sure. I agree completely. And I have such a hard time not playing Battle VIP Pass, but both the decks that we were high on, I think ended up being pretty good calls for the weekend. I think the Moltres deck is pretty good. It's one
Mhm.
of the things that I haven't played enough with to give like a ton of insight on, I guess. But like, man, it's hard for me to not play Battle VIP Pass. I don't know.
Yeah, it sucks. Like that card's just I think if we grinded with that deck, like we're testing it for an event, I think we'd find a way to at least fit a few in.
Yeah,
Probably all four. I mean, let's be honest with it. We're
that's.
gonna
I
win all
mean,
four.
I said this about Kyogre the other or Kyurem the other week. Like, you can't convince me to play 3 Battle VIP Pass, right? Like, you can convince me
Yeah,
to play one in a deck that's got a full set of Iridas or you know Arvins or whatever. Pick one of the cards that searches for an item. You can convince me to play like a one of with tutors. You can't convince me to play less than 4 without them.
no, I agree. I agree completely. But yeah, so let's get into some of the results. Let's start with Portland because that's the one that was kind of top of mind for us because it was the North American region. A lot of the players that we would follow typically were at that event, and because we are recording this on Monday, so by the time you hear this, whenever this comes out on Friday, probably
We're gonna have
Portland.
more information that we don't have now.
So if we sound outdated, that's why. But we do have the top eight, seven of the top eight lists because I've not seen the Mew list posted anywhere. But like we already said, RCS Giratina won the event. I haven't watched the final yet, or I don't know if it was the final or if it was in the top four when he played Grant. But I know that there was a Squovit moment, which is probably worth going back and seeing because it was just like a high roll potential and it kind of worked out. So if you enjoy that kind of nonsense, there's that. But so the RCS Giratina deck that won, uh, obviously built around RCS V Star, which its Starbirth ability is your V Star power that lets you search for 2 cards and put them into your hand, and then it has Trinity Nova for 200 that takes 3 basic energies and puts them on one of your or on your V to your Pokemon V in any way that you like. So that's obviously been an engine that's been built around for the last couple of years. Giratina V Star was the version that we were talking about last week. It's been around for a while because for a Grass, Psychic, and a Colorless, it attacks for 280, and you just have to remove 2 energy from anywhere on your board. It's just really good. It's efficient damage. It's one of the few things that can really like hit that high number efficiently. Removing energy is not necessarily a problem because you have stuff like Double Turbo that you can put on either RCS or like on your board. It doesn't even necessarily have to be on Giratina. The Bidoof Bibarel thing has been like Bibarel's been like what that was in your Nats deck last year, right? Like the Nats winning deck last year. So this kind of like Arceus
World's winning, yeah,
Bibarel.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Sorry. So Arceus
I guess your
Bibarel has been.
NAIC deck too, depending on which one you meant, but
I meant
both.
Azulda. You're right. I forgot. I actually forgot it one word. Like I knew it was. Yeah, for whatever reason, I forgot it one both. But yeah, so Arcee and Bibarel have been a combination for going back to last summer because even though Arceus gets set up very often because of its V-Star power, you do like to have Bibarel there to kind of complement you throughout the game. Bibarel's ability, Industrious Incisor, says once per turn you may draw until you have 5 cards in your hand. And like the thing that came out in Scarlet Violet that some people have messed with, but others weren't sure if they liked it because it is a little bit vulnerable to Lost Box, is the Squovit. Its Nest Stash ability says once per turn you may shuffle your hand and put it on the bottom of your deck. And if you do put any, and then you draw a card. So that might sound terrible, but if you have like a handful of like just a clunked up hand, this just combos so well with Bibarel to basically just get you a free new hand without playing your supporter. The 60 HP is scary because of Lost Box, but I mean, I don't know. Like this deck just feels really good. It has what we liked about Mew as well, and that it's a Path Judge deck.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said last week, I thought this deck was
I
an
don't.
amazing call.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this deck because I think we went pretty in depth on it last week.
Yeah.
Couple things that like I guess I want to say I'm surprised about here. They opted to both play the Squovet and not play any copies of Sharon's Care, which makes me a little bit scared about the Lost Box matchup. Though you are
Yeah.
obviously you've got 4 Judge here and 4 Boss in this list, which I do like a lot. So you're kind of taking the aggressive game plan there and just trying to slam in with these kind of arcs and just kill as many things as efficiently as possible and never let them get off to a good start. I do really actually like a Sharon's Karen here from my testing, especially if you're not going to play Pika to try to set that game plan up. And I guess the other notable thing too is that they didn't play any other attackers. It's just Arceus Giratina. I don't mind that at all. I kind of came around to the idea. I think people were more prepared for Vulpix than I felt like they were going to be. And it kind of fell out of pretty much all of the decks. I think that was a little bit of an oversight. I guess I didn't think it was something people would adapt to fast enough. But no Pika was a little surprising to me. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know last week we talked about it and both kind of felt like we should play some secondary attacker. Do you still kind of feel that way, or do you think that this was the way to go and anything else is too cute?
I think I'd want to keep trying some secondary attackers. Like you said, neither this or the Singapore, which we don't. The results for the Singapore regional are a little bit harder to get in terms of like the top 8 decks have not been uploaded.
Yeah, I have the first place list. I can pull
As
it
do
for
I.
you.
Yeah, I brought it up
okay.
as well. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't play any
Same
secondary
thing.
attackers.
Yeah.
But it does play the Sharon, I believe.
Yep,
If I'm,
it does.
If my eye. Yeah, so the lists are slightly different, very similar, but I like the idea of a Sharon because, like you said, between the Squovit and not playing Peak or not playing Vulpix, and like if you don't play Sharon, it can be kind of sketchy into.
Yeah, it feels like it's a
Lost
one
Box.
of that would just go very far away in that matchup. And I guess like it is tough. I know there's not a ton of open slots in the list, outside of the trekking shoes really, but I think you can certainly come up with a slot for one of them personally.
Yeah, I would be. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I want to. Like, I'm looking forward to watching the stream because, like I said, he did play Grant, and I should say Landon Kettler is the person who won the event. I don't think I've actually said his name yet. I just said
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so I know they played Grant in the top 4, so I want to watch that match to see how. I know Grant. I mean, Grant always makes it seem like he kind of gets unlucky, so I saw him tweet that, so I don't want to just take that full bore, but I want to watch it to see kind of how that played out because that does not feel like, given the way his list is built, like that would be an amazing matchup. So I'm kind of interested to go back and watch that one.
Yeah, for sure. And I know Grant, ever the grinder's mindset where you're always unlucky, which I get completely.
Yeah, I'm not even faulting him. I totally get it, but I was like, well,
no, you either outplayed them or you got unlucky. I totally get it. I've been there.
So, yeah. Okay, so he Landon beat Reagan Retzloff in the finals, which that's what Reagan's second place this year in a regional championship. So that sucks, obviously. Again with Lugia, and this was kind of a little bit of a surprise, right? In that
it was a surprise in the sense that we were both low on the deck.
And I don't think it was just us. I think like the community at large was
yeah. I would agree.
A little bit low on the deck.
And go ahead.
No, please. I talked about the last one. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I think that we kind of both felt there was a chance Lugia top 8s. We were just low on the deck because we weren't thrilled with its matchup spread going into the weekend. But what happened, and this is something that like we kind of I don't know how much we touched on this. I guess this was something that was in my thoughts a little bit that I had written down, but I don't really know if we got to it. Like we predicted a ton of Guardy to show up and it not to convert, which was part of the reason we were low on Lugia though, because there was a ton of Guardy. But if the Guardy doesn't convert and you get deeper into the tournament, suddenly you're looking at a good matchup spread for Lugia. And if you look
Yeah.
at the top eight, I don't think you have any terrible matchups in top eight other than, well, I guess you have an Arctur in top eight, which is a very, very bad matchup, and then Mew, which I consider to be reasonably unfavored. A lot better when you play the Yveltal, which you did play. But that's part of how metagaming works, and the other part of that is like you don't necessarily play the matchups that you expect to play or that are projected by the field. I mean, something that's easy to get caught up in would be like, oh man, even last format, actually, I'll use this as the example because I think it drives it home even better. Lugia was 30% of the metagame, right? Well, I played Mew at Toronto, hoping to play at Lugia's because it felt like it was a Lugia farming simulator. I only played two, and the craziest part of that was I played them rounds 2 and 3 and started the event 5-0. I didn't play another Lugia the rest of the tournament. So
Yeah,
like, and the deck was converting well still at that event. Like you just don't play what you expect out of the field. Sometimes it just is what it is. So like they could have dodged the Guardies. They could have beaten the Guardies. I didn't check it, but I think if this holds true, because then I do think we're going to see a big drop off for Guardy. I think Lugia is back on the menu, and they did do what I think is the optimal VMAX for the deck. Play the Urshi to clear the Dura matchup. I just don't think that playing your own Duras does enough. But I think that really does clear the gap in some of the awkward matchups. I think the bad matchups are going to be on the downfall because of the decks that we didn't really want to play. Only Mew did well, which we did predict and will continue to predict, I'm sure, just because the deck has a great matchup spread.
Not biased at all.
No, I mean it just does have a great matchup spread.
No, it does. I'm messing with you, yeah.
No, I know you are. I'm just saying, like, it actually does have a really good matchup spread this format, and like you can have which deck is favored between it and Lugia if Lugia is trying to beat it by playing the Yveltal, but like at worst it's close. And at best it's Mew. Like there's no world where it's heavily Lugia favored, let me put it that way. And there are plenty of ways for you to interpret it as being heavily Mew favored. But I mean I think if Guardy's on the downswing, something that reintroduces is Goo, but the Urshi can clear the Goo matchup as well. So I think Lugia I stick by my choice that I wouldn't have played it last week, just looking at what the expected metagame was, but I think it's going to come back into the meta a lot stronger than that, and I think this list is pretty much exactly what I would play for the deck. We're a couple cards off, I think, but overall, this is what your Lugia list should look like. There's not a ton of space. This is the thing we talked about last week, too. The deck just doesn't have that many options for you to customize it, but it's a good deck. It's not going to stop being a good deck.
Yeah, I was gonna say that being said, I really do like the list. I think they did I think Reagan and I assume that the Bradford team all worked on this together. I think they did a really good job on this list, fitting in everything kind of that you wanted to. I know that when we had talked about Lugia late last week, we liked where we were at. We also wanted to find a way to get the Yveltal back in there, so I kind of like that they did that. Just overall.
Yeah, no, I think it's really nice list for sure. And one of the things I want to shout out real quick, just like they did fit in. One of the things that like I had come to, had sort of accepted as my fate, was playing either less Lugias, or cutting the Pumpkaboo and playing, if I did that, like then cutting Pumpkaboo and playing like more Mesagozas, which makes you a little bit flippier. I'm not necessarily sure which way is better to go. Like the Pumpkaboo being able to give you more copies of cards to Pop Path is a really big deal, but Aroma is flippy, so like you're still flipping for the out versus having another card that you can draw. But I mean, if you're just swapping Pumpkaboo for a Stadium, that's not quite the same thing anyway. So, I like the choices they made to fit all of the cards they wanted in. I don't think they're missing any cards that I'm like, man, I really, really would want to be playing that. I do think like the only thing that kind of gets me with this, even with the Pumpkaboo, only having 2 Mesagoza isn't necessarily uncommon. But it's another thing that puts you on, when you look at this list, like, you're really priced into Burnetting for your Archeops in here.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily a problem. It's just, like, something you need to understand and kind of make your game choices that way. I'll never play 2 Burnett, but there are a lot of situations where you need to really make sure you're paying attention whether that one's prized or not, and how you're sequencing your Luminions if you need to use one for something else early on to keep going. Just something to be really cognizant of if you play the deck.
Yeah.
Swear I had another point, but I've lost it. So I will let that go until I randomly remember it 3 segments from now.
Sounds about right. That's fine. We can always sneak it back in there.
Oh, that's the thing. Actually, I did remember. So if we're like, this is something that I go back and forth on all the time. So I do want to get your opinion on it.
Mhm.
If you're this priced into Burnetting for your Archeops, do you really need to play 4? Like the upside high roll, if you draw one, hit a Messagoza or hit a Capture Rune when you already have a Lugia V Star and can pitch them to Ultra Ball is great. But it's like not that common. I mean, and I've played this deck a lot, and the games where you hit that, you do want to just fucking lose your mind. It's so good, but it's not consistent. It's not common.
No.
You're planning on Burnetting for them. Getting the other ones as high rolls. Is it worth playing an extra Garnet for that? Especially when we're
Uh,
talking about the deck being space starved, right? Like it wouldn't be a question if the deck was you had plenty of room. We're talking about not being able to fit cards that we want into the deck.
yeah, I guess the issue would be just in terms of pricing at that point. Because anytime, like, I mean, obviously that's such small percentage points, but like,
Yeah,
anytime you prize 2, you'll just want to quit the game.
yeah. I mean, your bigger concern is prizing the Burnett at that point, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah,
Because you're even more unlikely to hit without the Burnett. But you're already
Yeah.
pretty concerned about hitting the Burnett.
Yeah, so you could definitely sell me on it.
I think it also depends what you identify as like the thing you would want to put in, or
Yeah.
what issues you have. Like if there's something, because like I guess in my head right now, I'm looking at this list and going, I wouldn't mind cutting that for the third Messagoza.
Yeah,
And
I could see that.
that's another consistency card anyway. In a way, like you're still. I mean, the Archeops is 100% an Archeops, but Messagoza is 50% an Archeops, and also a path out, and can find your other stuff, can get you Luminion if you need a Burnett. I don't know. It's just something that like I feel like we hit the point last format where 4 Archeops was a sacred cow that you didn't touch in Lugia, and I'm just getting less and less convinced the more I play the deck this format.
Yeah, I would definitely say that it's less so to me than it was last format. I don't know if I'm there
It
yet.
wasn't a question last format. I at least feel like there's a conversation now. I don't. I guess that's sort of my question to you more. So, do you think there's a conversation, or am I getting too cute?
No, I don't think you're getting too cute. I know. Also, I think that I mean the deck was just like there was no reason to. It was one of those if it's broke, don't fix it type things.
Hmm.
But like I think if we had gotten to the point last format where we were playing Burnett because we were already playing 2 fish, then I do think that's a conversation that could have come up then because
Well, that was a
I mean,
conversation that came up at the very beginning of the
Yep.
format, and I spent a lot of the format kind of not positive that we hadn't dismissed Burnett too early because like the deck did brick, and I feel like just playing the one Burnett in your Lugia list last format would have, you know, I'm not going to quote any real percentages, but you certainly increase your hit percentage by playing the Burnett, and the deck could afford to play a card that did stone nothing if you, as long as you hit. So
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's actually I definitely do think it's worth discussing. I mean, to be fair, I think most things are probably worth discussing. So yeah, I'm on board with you there. With it, it's worth kind of getting back into the thought process of. I mean, like you said, it's all about what you're going to cut it for. If you're just going to cut it for the sake of, like, I don't know, like yes, I understand that Messagoza might be worth it. So yes.
yeah, I mean, again, the deck is just starved in space, and now you kind of look at what like causes your bad matchups, and then one of the things the deck loses to is Path to the Peak, and you don't have Quick Ball. The Pumpkaboo's not as consistent as it used to be. I do understand still doing it, but like this isn't last format where Pumpkaboo was like, oh, I've got 8 cards that are going to do it. I have 4 cards that are going to do it, and then 4 cards that flip for it.
Mhm.
And I don't have an issue with the flippy cards in Lugia. Don't misconstrue that, but you do have like it's outing path is binary. You have to do it, or you can't play with this deck.
Mhm.
And so like that's just something that like I value super highly. And when I can make a change that is adding both a consistency card and a path out to my deck, I'm kind of into that idea.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. That makes sense. The more we talk it out, the more you're kind of selling me on the idea of actually considering it. But
I'm gonna probably try it and just see. I mean, again, like there's a question of if it's worth being priced into Burnetting every time, but
yeah,
you've got a ton of gift energies. You're trying to put them on your attackers anyway. So, the other thing I want to mention for this list, which I completely respect, though I haven't gotten there myself, is that they didn't play Stone Drainer.
yeah,
Totally reasonable thing to do, actually, because as we touched on last week, Miraidon is a deck that top aided, but it's not the metagame share is not going to be that high. The win rate's not that high overall, and I think cutting Stone is totally reasonable. Like that's to use that as an example. By the way, I don't think I would cut Archeops for an extra tech attacker. I wouldn't cut that to put a Stone Drainer in my deck. I'd rather just hit.
I guess my question would be is, do you think that the performance this weekend across the three regionals of Arceus makes it so that you want like is the Arceus matchup is probably pretty okay anyway, right? Like I haven't we haven't tested it, but
So
like
here's what I'll tell you. I mean, a big part of the reason the Mew matchup is hard is because they're path judging you.
yeah,
So is Archeops. Less than Lugia, or less than Mew is, but they're still path judging you.
okay,
The good news is, like, they're only playing one choice belt, which means they only have one V Star Tina attack that can one shot a Lugia with V Guard on it. Um, so you're not like that bad there on the prize trade, and you're able to kind of snipe down the 200 or the 220 bench guys pretty easily.
yeah,
That being said, the Arceus V Star with V Guard, if they present one of those, is kind of a pain to deal with. You have to put so many single strike energies on Tyranitar to clear that. But
yeah.
Urshi does one shot it as well.
That's true.
So,
You know what? I wasn't even thinking about Urshi. That makes sense.
I mean, but again, then you get to the question of, like, yeah, but is this efficient for prize trading? The good news is the Urshi VMAX doesn't get one shot by Tina ever in the deck. So I
Yeah,
think
that's what I
you're
was gonna
okay.
say. Yeah, I was overlooking the Urshifu VMAX, so I can
Hmm.
retract that question a little bit there because, like you said, with even if it's just two of
Hmm.
the single strike energies on the Urshifu VMAX, as long as the other one's like a V guard or something.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
one
think
shots Arceus. So
yeah, so I think that's probably fine. You're right. Okay, so let's move on. We can get into so that from there, the next what
we
three
got
of the
three
top.
Lost Box decks. Yeah.
Yeah, they're to some degree different. I actually haven't looked at Andrew Gantner's list yet, so we're doing that live. But in a moment, we'll look at Grant Manley's first. And this is that America team that this while Isaiah's team that has Reagan in here is a pretty commonplace in the top cuts.
Yeah,
So
there's
is
two of
Grant's.
them.
Yeah. So this is your normal say Lost Box with Kyogre and Dragonite V and Raikou V, something that they made popular a lot last format. Not
Yeah.
surprised to see them coming back to it again here. Um,
This is
if you
really
play
just their deck from last format at the end of the day, right?
essentially, yes, yeah. The one Pokestop, one Beach Court. You got the 2/4 Seal Stones, three Energy Recycler, which I know we've talked about before, makes me want to throw up, but also
I get it. Just makes me want to
I
throw up.
do. Yeah, it's tough with like, and not obviously with only one Pokestop, you're not stopping a lot, but you could. It gives you a little bit more free reign. With Greninja to just kind of pitch things, gives you just a few different options. So like, I definitely get it. It's just
Mhm.
it's tough. But yeah, there's not much to talk about here because the deck list hasn't really changed all that much, right? If you were paying
No, not
attention
at
last
all.
format to when Kyogre was around, this is about what it looked like last format. And I mean, the deck's just good. Kyogre is such like in terms against Lugia or Mew, probably also against these Arceus decks. Not necessarily Duraludon, but like against the other ones that put a couple things on the bench that you're able to kind of pick off. It kind of gives you just a lot of versatility there. So for Andrew Gantner's list, I'm looking at it now. There's just I see a
So
Snorlax.
he has a little bit of a different list, yeah, because he
Yeah,
opted to play the Luminion V, which is something that like has gone in and out of the list. It was in there a lot more last format. Again, Quick Ball, RIP, but opted to play that and some Ultra Balls in order to enable it, which
yeah,
is very costly. But if you're finding courses experiment, you're doing stuff, you're in business. Um, this list, no Kyogre, which is a little bit frustrating for me. I just think Kyogre was the card that actually put the deck over the top in the current format. But just opting for a more consistent Dragonite, Raikou, Drapion kind of lineup. And like you said, he has the Snorlax in the deck. No Pokestop because no Kyogre. The two kind of go hand in hand. And yeah, I mean, not a lot to say here either. He did opt to play a Roxanne, which I'm like, I don't know, here nor there on, I guess, in this kind of version of the deck. It just doesn't excite me. But it's obviously never bad to resolve a Roxanne.
yeah. I like the card. It's just I always find that I want to just put something else in place of it. But like if you have the space, that card's insane, especially in here because you are trading the single. Like if they knock out one of your V's and then a couple, like you can just like kind of make it so that they just struggle to get into, and you're able to just save a life for the rest of the game. So I
Yeah.
get it. It's just I don't know.
The thing that
Um,
worries me in this list about it is that you're playing the Luminion, so you're really, really susceptible to like Horn Boss stuff anyway. So it's like
yeah,
you can't really map out the prizes as safely if you have to go for the Luminion play.
certainly not.
The other thing, just to mention one other thing in the list that I really do not like, this would be the biggest change I would want to make. There's only 3 escape ropes in here. Uh, get your 4th rope, homie.
Yeah,
There's a card you can cut in here. I'm sure we can figure one out.
I mean, I guess the like that's a lot. That's a lot more V's than I'm used to seeing in a deck like in the Force Seal version. So I was kind of surprised to see
Yes
that.
and no. I think you have to play either Drapion or Kyogre. It's your choice which one you play.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a
That's
V,
fair.
and then it's just like the Luminion.
Yeah, but I mean that's still
Mhm.
Or like 1.5 more
Yeah,
than
yeah.
usual. So yeah, I think that like if I like, and that's probably just me liking the Grant version more than I have like the Andrew version for the last 6 months. So I
Yeah.
think that's probably just my bias there. But like that's the thing that immediately jumps out to me.
I really hope that one of these guys posts some thoughts on the deck at some point because we talked last week about how we're just kind of off Ryko in the deck, and
Mm.
then I mean Lugia did top cut, but I still don't think that like really justifies it necessarily, especially when you can play the Kyogre to help in that matchup. So
Yeah,
I'd be curious to get some thoughts there and see their thoughts on it. I just don't think that it's the optimal use of your space, but uh, definitely would love to hear some more thoughts on that.
for sure, for sure. And then there's Alex Szymanski's, which congrats to him on back-to-back top eights. Like obviously he won a couple weeks ago at EUIC, and now he has uh, another top cut here with Lost Box, obviously in a very different direction where he was playing, boring Arceus Duraludon.
Stinky,
At
stinky, stinky.
Yes, very smelly. But now we get to play Lost Box, so his brain's working again. We're happy to see it. And he is playing the Kyogre deck, but instead of playing some of like the V attackers that we talked about with uh Dragonite and Raikou and stuff, he is playing a Snorlax and a Galarian Moltres, which
Yeah,
I
full
like I said
single
earlier,
prizers.
I really like this list. I think that, or at least this concept. I haven't like dove fully in on each of his counts, but it's pretty close to what I would really like because you are just like being full single prize is just so strong.
Mhm.
Moltres being able to hit both Mew and Gardevoir for weakness is really helpful in a lot of ways because like you're not like that's one of the things you miss is like why so many people would end up putting Drapion in because you wouldn't have an option otherwise.
Mhm.
Moltres does the same thing. It works so well with Clara. It works so well with Pokestop. Like I know I've talked about before not loving Pokestop in a lot of decks like this because of some of the risk, but I love it in this version. So yeah, I like that he of the three people that topped with Lost Bucks, he is the only one that played second Cramorant, which again in a full single prize version I really like because you are able to kind of set up that damage, so you're either finishing off two shots with a Snorlax or setting up damage later on a bigger Pokemon for Kyogre in case you have to like whittle your resources down a little bit. I think it just kind of opens itself up for a lot of optionality. It lets you kind of control the pace of the game a lot more. So I'm a big fan of this list. What did you
Yeah,
think?
I think this list is really good. It's worth noting as far as the second Cramorant goes, especially you are a lot slower than it may seem, even when you're not playing. I mean, first off, we already touched on it. No battle VIP pass. That automatically your deck is going to be slower. It's
Yeah,
you know probably more consistent in some ways because these games do or these decks do want to go on for a lot of turns, but automatically your deck is slower. And then no Forest Seal Stone. Again, your deck gets slower, and I don't believe this list is playing any Lost Vacuums,
no,
which is also reasonable, but again, slower. So
yeah.
you're kind of trying to take a game plan where you're going to take a lot more turns. You get a lot more attacks when you do that, and you're not ever giving up two prizes, and not like you are aiming to never give up two prizes. You're literally never giving up two prizes. Well, other than like a multi knockout attack,
Yeah.
and that makes your Cramorants a lot better. You have a lot more time to get that game plan going. Kind of working backwards here in a lot of ways. I'm surprised to see a Roxanne in the other list and then none in this one by comparison. I'm not saying I would play Roxanne necessarily, but when you're playing Pokegears and that kind of stuff in here, I wouldn't be upset to see one in here.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really do want to call out in this list that I think is really, really strong is the Halucha with a level ball included.
Yeah.
That's a difference maker in the mirror match, and when you have both that and the Kyogre, you're beating Lost Box mirrors, and that's really, really important because it is still super played.
Yeah, if you're going to sacrifice the speed, you like to have the option there that even if I go behind on prizes on like maybe in the first
Mhm.
two turns, between like you said, between Kyogre and the Halucha the Sable I play, you're making up that deficit. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
I
then,
like that a lot.
same token, a Moltres and a Kyogre, that's game against Mew already. You don't need anything besides those two cards. You've beaten Mew. You have the time. You're never giving up too many prizes. Your only risk is that they come out of the gate extremely aggressive, judge you to hell and back, and you never recover. But if you're given
Yeah.
time to set up, you're winning that matchup the way this deck is constructed.
Yep.
So I do like this list a lot. I'm not positive it's my favorite Lost Box list, just because I haven't put enough time in with it. But I think I do like the Lost Box deck still, and I think this deck is really good.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So we don't have the Mew list yet. Obviously, by the time this comes out, we probably will, but definitely look at that because we were big fans of Mew, and I thought there would be at least one more in top cut, but definitely, obviously, still a very strong play. Miraidon, I was wrong. I'll admit it. Like I think this deck sucks. I've said that. I've been pretty clear about that. I like this list more than it's still a weird list, but more than most Miraidon lists. So I know that this is take your victory lap. I'll let you take this deck
Yeah,
because
sure. Because I've been high on Miraidon Flaffy as the version of Miraidon that's going to be good because it plays less cards that do literally nothing. But this list is cool. I'm not in love with this list either. They did a couple things that I think are really really good. Playing the 2-1 Magnezone line, I think, is just 100% correct. One of the big problems for the other version of the deck is how do you ever beat Lost Box? Magnezone V kills Manaphy, so you can just eat their Manaphies. They have to deal with the Magnezone V, even if they would set up a second one, or like Clarifort or whatever, they have to clear your Magnezone V, or you just keep eating the Manaphies. And you play the 2-1 line because you can use the Magnezone V Star's Electro Star ability to also take 2 prizes, which does a lot to swing the matchup for you. It doesn't necessarily like make it free or anything like that, but it goes a huge distance in making the matchup better for you. You do obviously have the kind of inconvenience of having Flaffies that sit on your bench and get eaten alive by Sablezing Greninjas. But in that matchup, it's less about getting a lot of energies and more just about attacking with your efficient attackers, so you can sort of skip that part of the game plan there. This version also has 2 Raichu Vs, which is another thing that I don't love about the list. I just don't think you need to play 2. You really are trying to close with that card by one-shotting like a VMAX, or you can use it if you need to clear something like a V-Star with a V-Guard energy that can take a bajillion million damage. But with the Flaffies and the generators, you can set that up. You do have the Sky Seal Stone in these lists, which I think is really good. With the Raichu specifically, you're able to clear up some gaps there, take some 3 or 4 prize knockouts. Again, just really strong in certain spots. And my favorite part of this list is the 3 copies of Arven. Something we talked about in the deck from whichever IC that was, EUIC, was the Cram-O-Matics that they played. And I think in that discussion, we were like, you could just play Arven to search the cards you need while we flipping for him. Well, this guy did that. He played some Arvens, got the cards he needed. Massive supporter line in this list, by the way. I'm very surprised by that thick supporter count, and even more surprised in a negative way for this part on the Force Arenas. That doesn't feel like it could possibly be right, and it feels like you probably would want to play less supporters in general and probably play some more consistency cards and things of that nature. But the list overall, I mean, I like this version of Miraidon. I think more people need to be iterating on Miraidon Flaffy, and I think there's definitely something to this, though I still don't think the deck is especially good either. But I don't know. Any thoughts on your end, I guess, about the deck, the archetype, anything?
I like this one much more, like you said. I think we stressed how much Arven was like one of my favorite cards in Scarlet Violet whenever that set came out, and I'm happy to see it kind of seeing significantly more play here. Yeah, the Force Arena, I knew it because I looked at the list earlier when you sent it to me, and then whenever I was talking about how we'll like this list more and how it's different, and then I immediately saw the Force Arena again and was like, yeah, this is weird. I'm not quite sure how I feel about this. Like you said, I think the Magnezone actually, no matter which version you play, whether it is the terrible one with Regieleki or this slightly less terrible one, I do think the Magnezone VV Star is too good to pass up at this point, just because of the utility it gives you.
Completely agree.
I will still probably not play Miraidon at anything real, at least until we get different cards. But this list is much closer to where I'd like to be at.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
I think I have to eventually just try this list card for card because there's a lot of things that just don't quite add up to me, and I'm definitely willing to be wrong because I've championed Miraidon Flaffy as the Miraidon version, but I haven't put a ton of time in with it. So like, there's definitely some things I need to see. Like 13 energy, I'm cool with going down on energies, but like you don't want to miss too often on electric generator, and you also want to make sure you find them to put in your discard pile for Flaffy. No Radiant Greninja, and as such, less Nest Balls is kind of an interesting choice to me. You really do want to find that first Miraidon. I don't know what the risk of not finding it is, but you definitely do want to find it, so that's something to think about. But I don't know. Like overall, I like Miraidon Flaffy. I don't love this list, but I haven't put enough time in to confidently say that they're doing anything wrong. So I'll hold some judgment here.
The one thing I will say they're doing wrong, and
It's playing Force Arena.
Well, yes, but you can't see this on Limitless, but you can if you look at the picture of their list that they posted. Their art choices are absolutely egregious. They picked the high-end Miraidon, but then have regular Raikou Vs. They only have one full art Magnezone V, and one full art Mareep. Like the lack of matching there just really hurts my eyes. They picked rainbows for Serenas and the bosses. I just
I think that one's fine.
no, it isn't. Rainbows are hideous. Get better cards. Anyway, that's I just eventually I have to rant on things like that. Whenever everything kind of there's no like continuous aesthetic there. I'm just like, what are
I
you
want to make
doing?
this clear that Corey also has said before that he would get rainbows of cards if they're cheaper. He's done this himself in the past.
This is true. And I also deserve to be ripped for doing that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. The Reikuvi is the most. I don't know the price difference, but like that's especially egregious because the other ones are unreal.
Oh, it's like a $20 difference, but still, like, get your bread up. You have the $50 Miraidons.
My man really knew what he wanted.
Like I said, I think the thing that actually bothers me the most is either the Magnezone V's mismatching or the Mareeps mismatching. That's just bizarre. But anyway, another thing that's going to really, make Dave happy. Arceus, Duraludon, Umbreon as your last deck in top 8. I had seen some Arceus piles with Umbreon, not with Duraludon necessarily online, and I've been messing around with them a little bit because, like, I get it, being able to use Umbreon V both for the weakness that it hits and
Yeah, totally.
as a boss is good, like good enough in this format, right? Like being able, like this deck should be able to like really push stuff like Gardevoir out of the meta. So if you were expecting an uptick in Gardevoir, I get it because you're able to hit that for weakness. You don't even need like any of the damage modifications that like a choice belt or anything like that because you are hitting the right number with Umbreon for weakness. Being able to play things like Radiant Alakazam and Hawlucha are cute. There's just no way that you would ever. Like you're never signing up with this deck. Even if you could talk yourself into some other Arceus piles, I can't imagine any world where you. Yeah.
Not a chance.
The supported line is interesting. We have 3 Adventures Discovery, which for anyone who doesn't know, because this card does not come up all that often, lets you search for up to 3 Pokemon V from your deck, reveal them, and put them in your hand. So that is a good consistency card in a deck like this, where you're able to kind of get like the ideal is like on turn 2, you're getting Arceus V Star, one of your attackers to set up, and maybe like the Umbreon to boss up something, and
even if you go second, like just going grab Arceus V, grab Umbreon or Dura, and grab the Arceus V Star, like that's really good. If you started with something goofy,
yeah,
this is one of those cards that I think is like probably not seen as much play as it deserves. Funny enough, every time it shows up, it's in something kind of silly, but it is just very, very powerful. There's not a lot of cards that let you search both like basics and evolutions. You think about the price you pay for an Ultra Ball, and this card gives you that flexibility and gets you 3 of them, so it can definitely get you a lot of really good value. And I don't know, man, the core conceit of this deck is just not something that I'm into, not something I can really fully get behind.
I mean, it takes what we like about like what we've deigned to like about the RCS decks in terms of they be Judge Path decks, and this doesn't play Path. It plays 3 Lost City. Obviously, you can't really play Path if you're going to rely on Umbreon V Star and Duraludon V Max. Or sorry, I said Umbreon V Star. The V Max is Umbreon and Duraludon. If you're relying on them that much, you obviously can't play Path. So I get it. I just like it less. I know Salt only plays 2 Judge, so not as much disruption. But like your
disruption
is your abilities.
Right.
There's a Volo in here, which is something, and
in a Karen's prediction.
I've liked both of these cards far more than you have, which is to say that I know you knew what Volo did before today, but I probably only very little. Did you even know what Karen's Conviction does now?
I just read it.
Okay, if you did, so you did not know before that.
Not before today.
So the reason why they were for it was because it lets you actually just kill goo, which there's that.
Okay.
So
cool.
Yeah, we're done with this event. So that got out everything we needed out of Dave for Arceus, Duraludon, Umbreon. So we're gonna move over to Sao Paulo really quickly, mostly because while it was almost as big as this tournament, we only have the first 2 lists so far. The winning list was a Lost Box deck, playing again the Dragonite and the Raikou and the Drapion. So it's the split stones, which we talked about that briefly last week, and I don't think you were a fan of splitting stones at all, correct?
Yeah, I just don't think that the spots where you get a lot of value out of the Scasiel Stone are like available enough in the format for it to be worth it in my eyes. The only spot where it really happens, like you can get value against Lugia with Raikou, and then against Mew it's very good with Drapion, but I just don't think you're hitting enough of the spots where it's good for me to want to put the copy in my deck. But that's really like what that boils down to for me. It's not like it's awful or anything. It's not something that I like actively hate. I just don't think you're getting enough value out of it, and I personally wouldn't bother.
To be fair, without watching the stream, which I haven't, I may have absolutely won a
Well,
bunch
he
of
beat Mew in the
matches.
finals, so
I was
it
gonna
was
say he
probably
beat
pretty
Mew in
good
the
there, huh?
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, well, he showed you. Yeah, the Mew list is also interesting. It plays two Path and one Lost City and one Collapse Stadium. It plays the Pidgeot V and the Dreepy. I know we talked about it months ago whenever this first came out. Do you like where the Dreepy is in this current format, or how do you feel about this?
Um, I don't love it. We talked about this with Mawwow
Come
Trap
on,
essentially last week, where I think people are more prepared to play against it than they were before, which puts you in a spot where, again, especially against Lugia, where you're kind of coin flipping to see if they have the out, because if they do and you're going for the full deck out, you just lose. I think
Mhm.
the cool upside in Mew is that you are allowed to just use it to buy time for a little bit until you can find like a key one shot on something, like so you can build your hand up to the spot where you go like, all right, now I'm going to knock out your Tyranitar and I'm going to judge you in the same turn or whatever, which is interesting, but I don't know. It's not great. I don't love it. And if you're gonna do that, you're trying to bait the Pumpkaboo, so it is very interesting that this place only has two paths to the peak.
Yeah, but it has
But
Lost City and Collapse Stadium.
well, I suppose you also can lock Luminion now, which I'm discounting there.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's fine. I think that this was. I mean, they showed me they made the finals, but I think this was probably the worst week to try to do that because of everyone being prepared for Mall while coming off of the UIC. So I think
Yeah, exactly. Mama was so
there's
on the
places
radar,
for.
and
Yeah,
then
there's. Go
go.
ahead. Sorry.
No,
No,
you
no, no.
you see that reflected by the way with Zero Sablezard in top cut of Portland at least, and one of the main ways that deck was trying to swing a couple of its matchups was by Mawile trapping, and with that removed from the toolbox there, the deck saw a lot less success than it did previously.
Yeah, for sure. We just like I said, we don't have lists yet, so we don't necessarily know variants or anything like that. But the rest of the top 8 for Sao Paulo was a Gardevoir, a Lugia, another Arceus Giratina, two more Lost Boxes, and another Mew. So, I think that what's telling here is how much like we were expecting a more diverse format, right? And not that this is lacking in diversity, but three Lost Box, two Mew. This is a little bit more concentrated than after coming off a UIC where there was only one deck that got multiple spots in top 8. This one had two different strategies that got multiple, but it's still kind of like it has five different decks. So I think the format's in a really good place. Did you want to touch on anything else, whether it be Champions League in Japan or um, the regional in Singapore? Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we get out of here for the week?
No, not really. I think like largely our thoughts were kind of spot on though. Actually, I mean, one Guardy total in the top eights from these two events. Lost Box performing, the Dragonite version performing fairly well as the Kyogre Moltres version. I think Mew was well positioned. I think Arctina was well positioned. And we'll kind of see where the format goes from here because it is, interesting to see what happens now that I think Guardy, while not like hated out of the format, should definitely be noticeably kicked it back down to where it really was at a UIC before people tricked themselves. Again, this is the Tort effect in motion, where people believe the deck was much better than it is when they are not one of the best players in the world. Um, so that has ripples, right? So I'm really curious to see where the format kind of goes from here because that bumps Goo back up if we're going to see less Guardy. But there's also a chance that people just keep playing Guardy because it's a fun deck to play.
It is, yeah. So
And
we don't have any up. Oh, I thought
no,
you
no.
wanted to talk about it.
Last in looking forward, I think a lot of people are going to want to play it because it is purportedly extremely good when Paldea Evolve comes out. So, not a bad time to start grinding games with Guard either.
Yeah, it's interesting. You look at the next format, and I do think that some things obviously change. We get a ton of new cards, but you look at the top 4 for the first event. It was a 2,700 player tournament, so just an enormous event. And it was two Guardies in the finals, and a Lost Box, and an Arctina in the semis. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. We don't have an event this weekend. There's a special event in Bogota. Special events are typically smaller. I also don't know how many people will be traveling to Colombia. I know that typically their attendance is a little bit lower, but we'll be looking forward to Hartford when we come back next week. Hartford and Malmo and a special event in Buenos Aires. So May is still a busy month for Pokemon. I'm interested to see kind of you said how this format adapts from here. I want to give a special shout out to our boy JJ because we got a full Artangela revealed this week. So
Yeah, my
Pokemon
man is
151 looks hype.
hyped.
Yeah, that's like we're in this weird news place right now where we're just kind of getting 151 cards revealed, and they all look sick. I don't know, like I know that we talked briefly last week about the Blastoise EX, and I think that might be a good card. So far, there's nothing that's the Erica is good as well. So I'm interested to
Mhm.
see as we get more of this set revealed. I know the revealed starters, EX starter decks for Japan as well over the last week, and nothing like too crazy exceptional there. But we're getting a lot of stuff soon. So I think this format's going to keep evolving. Next format, like obviously we're seeing the first steps in that as well. So definitely an exciting time to be keeping up with Pokemon. But we will be back next week with another episode of Ancient Wisdom.
Thanks, guys.